Sirens are echoing across Miami Beach right now. Water is pushing through streets that were supposed to be protected. This is not a drill. The city spent $500 million on pumps designed to hold back the rising Atlantic, but tonight the ocean is coming anyway. Cameras show seawater bubbling up through storm drains, flooding roads, creeping toward homes and hotels. Officials are scrambling. Residents are watching the tide climb higher with every minute. What's happening beneath Miami Beach right now has scientists terrified. Because if the pumps can't stop the ocean during king tide season, this paradise could be facing a future it cannot escape. The first signs appear quietly. Just after sunrise along the palm-lined streets of Miami Beach, something strange begins happening. Water starts pushing up through the storm drains. At first it looks harmless, a thin shimmer spreading across the pavement. Tourists walking toward the beach barely notice it. Cars drive through shallow puddles without slowing down. But within minutes, the puddles start growing. Water creeps across intersections. It slides along sidewalks. It fills the low spots in the road like an invisible tide, slowly claiming territory. Residents step outside their homes and stare down the street in disbelief. Because this water isn't coming from rain, the sky is clear, and yet the ocean is somehow rising through the city itself. Drivers begin turning around as streets near the shoreline become submerged. Tire wakes ripple through water that now covers entire lanes. Storm drains gurgle violently, as if something beneath the streets is pushing back. Then the smell of salt fills the air. It's seawater. King tide season has arrived in South Florida, that annual moment when gravitational forces from the moon and sun pull the ocean slightly higher than normal. For decades it has brought minor flooding to Miami Beach. But what's happening this morning feels different, because the city was supposed to be ready. After years of warnings from scientists, Miami Beach launched one of the most expensive flood defense projects in America. Nearly $500 million invested into massive pump stations designed to remove seawater from the streets faster than it could flood them. The system was built to keep the city dry, and at first it seems to be working. Large metal pump housings hum to life across neighborhoods. Water begins flowing toward the drains. City workers monitor control panels as sensors measure tide levels rising along the coastline. But then the tide keeps climbing. By mid-morning, several roads near Biscayne Bay are already under several inches of water. Residents record videos on their phones as seawater bubbles up through manholes, like a fountain breaking through the pavement. The pumps are running, but the water keeps coming. And as the tide reaches its peak, an unsettling realization spreads through Miami Beach. The system designed to stop the ocean may already be falling behind. By late morning, the situation is no longer a curiosity. It is a problem. Inside Miami Beach's Emergency Operations Center, large screens display real-time data from dozens of pump stations scattered across the city. Engineers watch the numbers climb as tide gauges along Biscayne Bay record water levels creeping higher than expected. The pumps are already running at full capacity, and the tide hasn't even peaked yet. City officials begin making urgent phone calls. Public works crews are dispatched to several neighborhoods where flooding is spreading faster than predicted. Police vehicles start blocking off low-lying streets as water pushes deeper inland. From the outside, the system still looks impressive. The Miami Beach Flood Defense Network is massive. nearly 80 powerful pumps installed across vulnerable neighborhoods, each capable of moving thousands of gallons of water every minute. Together, they form one of the most ambitious coastal defense systems ever built in the United States. The project took years to construct. Millions of pounds of steel and concrete were buried beneath city streets. Sensors were installed to monitor tides. Underground pipes were designed to pull water away from flooded roads and force it back toward the bay. When the project was announced, it was hailed as a technological shield, a way to buy Miami time against the rising Atlantic, and for several years it seemed to work. But king tides are relentless. As the ocean continues rising outside the barrier islands, the pumps are now facing a different challenge. Not just water flowing in from the surface, but water pushing upward from below. Officials begin receiving reports from multiple locations. Water is appearing in places where pumps should have already cleared it. Entire blocks in the Sunset Harbor district are now ankle-deep. Businesses begin stacking sandbags outside their doors. Delivery trucks struggle to navigate flooded intersections where seawater reflects the bright Florida sun like a mirror. Then another alert flashes across the operations center screens. One of the major pump stations has reached its maximum operating limit. The machines are still running, roaring loudly as they force water through underground pipes. But the incoming tide is now feeding water into the city faster than the system can remove it. Engineers exchange uneasy glances, because the $500 million system was designed for situations exactly like this. Yet as the tide climbs higher, it becomes clear that Miami Beach is facing something far more complicated than simple flooding. The ocean isn't just coming over the streets. It's finding ways to rise through the city itself. As officials struggle to control the flooding above ground, scientists watching the situation know the real battle is happening somewhere else entirely, deep beneath Miami Beach. Because this city is not built on solid rock. It sits on limestone, a pale, ancient stone formed from compressed coral and marine shells over millions of years. On the surface, it feels stable enough to support skyscrapers, highways, and luxury hotels. But limestone has a dangerous secret. It is porous, filled with microscopic holes and channels carved by water over time. The rock beneath Miami behaves less like a barrier and more like a sponge. That means the ocean does not need to climb over the land to invade the city. It can move through the ground itself. As the king tide pushes seawater higher along the coast, pressure builds beneath the barrier island. Salt water begins forcing its way into the limestone layer under Miami Beach, slipping silently through cracks and underground pathways. And when that pressure reaches the city's drainage system, the water rises up through storm drains, through pipes, through gaps in the pavement. To people standing on the flooded streets, it looks like the ocean is appearing from nowhere. But scientists have warned about this exact phenomenon for years. Even the most powerful pumps cannot stop water that is entering the city from below the surface, because the pumps were designed to remove water from streets, not from the entire underground aquifer beneath the city. As the tide continues climbing, seawater begins infiltrating Miami Beach from multiple directions at once. It moves through drainage pipes that connect to the bay. It pushes upward through the porous ground, and it begins spreading beneath entire neighborhoods before finally surfacing in low-lying streets. To engineers monitoring the system, the pattern becomes clear. This is not a single flood. It is a slow underground invasion. In some locations, water bubbles up through the pavement even after nearby pumps have cleared the streets. In others, the drains start working in reverse salt water, pushing back through the system instead of flowing out. Residents watch in confusion as water seems to rise out of thin air. But for scientists studying Miami's geology, the explanation is brutally simple. The city is trying to hold back an ocean, while standing on a foundation that lets the ocean pass straight through it. And as king tide reaches its highest point of the day, the pressure beneath Miami Beach continues to build. The pumps are still fighting, but the ground beneath them is already filling with seawater. By early afternoon, Miami Beach no longer looks like a city fighting a flood. It looks like a city slowly becoming part of the ocean. The king tide has reached its peak, and the water now spreads across entire blocks. Streets that were dry just hours ago are turning into shallow canals. Sunlight reflects off moving water where traffic once flowed. Cars begin stalling in the middle of intersections as salt water reaches their engines. Drivers abandon vehicles and wade toward higher ground, their shoes sloshing through warm ocean water. Tourists standing outside beachfront hotels stare in disbelief. They came to Miami for sunshine and sand. Instead, the ocean is creeping into the streets. Along Alton Road, one of the city's major arteries, seawater now stretches curb to curb. Waves ripple as passing vehicles push water onto sidewalks. Restaurants and shops rush to move outdoor furniture indoors. The pumps continue roaring beneath metal grates. But the tide refuses to retreat. Every few minutes, another surge pushes through the drainage system. Storm drains that should be removing water are now struggling to keep pace with what's pouring into the city. In several neighborhoods, the water is already knee-deep. Children splash through flooded sidewalks while adults stand nearby, recording videos for social media. What looks playful at first quickly turns unsettling as the flooding spreads farther inland, because this is not rainwater, it is salt water, and salt water changes everything. Electrical systems begin shutting down in some buildings to avoid short circuits. Parking garages near the shoreline start closing as water creeps toward their lower levels. Even city buses are forced to reroute around submerged streets. Emergency crews move through flooded districts, checking storm drains, clearing debris, and monitoring pump stations that are now operating nonstop. The machines throb beneath the streets like giant mechanical hearts, trying to force the ocean back toward the bay. But the tide outside Miami Beach is still holding strong, and with the ground beneath the city already saturated with seawater, every gallon the pumps remove seems to be replaced by another pushing in from somewhere else. Residents watching the flooding from balconies begin to understand something unsettling. This isn't a sudden disaster like a hurricane. There are no violent winds, no crashing waves, just a slow, relentless rise. The kind that makes people realize the ocean is no longer waiting politely at the shoreline. It is already inside the city. By mid-afternoon, the flooding is no longer just an engineering problem. It is becoming a human one. In neighborhoods across Miami Beach, residents are now stepping into streets that look more like shallow lagoons. Water laps against doorsteps. Driveways are submerged. The familiar sounds of traffic are replaced by the constant sloshing of salt water moving through the city. For long-time residents, this is a disturbing sight. Some have lived here for decades. They remember when king tides brought occasional puddles near the shoreline. But what they are seeing now feels different, larger, deeper. spreading farther inland than many expected. Outside a small apartment building near Sunset Harbor, a resident rolls up his pant legs and carefully pushes his bicycle through water that reaches halfway up the tires. He pauses at the corner, staring at a flooded intersection where cars once rushed through the morning commute. Now the only movement is the slow drift of seawater. Across the street, a restaurant owner stacks sandbags along the entrance to his cafe. The lunch crowd has disappeared. Outdoor tables sit empty while water creeps across the patio tiles. This has never happened this bad before, he mutters to a neighbor filming the scene with a phone. Along the beachfront hotels, the mood is uneasy. Tourists gather near windows, watching the strange spectacle unfolding outside. Some laugh nervously, treating it like an unusual travel story. Others begin asking hotel staff serious questions. Is this normal? Will it get worse? Hotel employees do their best to reassure guests, but even they glance toward the flooded streets with uncertainty. The pumps are supposed to protect this city. The massive infrastructure buried beneath Miami Beach was built to keep scenes like this from happening. Yet the water remains. Taxi drivers refuse to enter several flooded roads. Rideshare drivers cancel trips after realizing entire blocks are underwater. Delivery trucks sit stranded as businesses close early to prevent damage from saltwater seeping inside. For many residents, the concern isn't just today's flooding. It's what it means for tomorrow. Saltwater corrodes metal. It damages electrical systems. It destroys pavement and foundations over time. Every hour that ocean water sits inside the city quietly eats away at the infrastructure that holds Miami Beach together. And as the tide lingers across the streets, a deeper fear begins to spread among those watching the water rise. If this is happening during a normal king tide, what happens when the ocean rises even higher in the years ahead? By late afternoon, Miami Beach is running out of easy solutions. The tide has begun to stabilize, but the water inside the city is still everywhere. Flooded streets glisten under the bright Florida sun, while emergency crews race from block to block trying to push the ocean back out. Public works trucks move slowly through the water, inspecting drains and clearing debris that could slow the pumps. Workers in reflective vests kneel beside metal grates, pulling leaves and trash from openings where the system is trying desperately to drain the streets. Beneath them, the machines are working harder than ever. Across the city, dozens of pump stations roar continuously. Massive electric motors spin inside reinforced concrete chambers, forcing seawater through underground pipes and pushing it back toward Biscayne Bay. Each pump moves thousands of gallons every minute, but the fight is exhausting. Engineers monitoring the system know these machines were never meant to run at full capacity for hours without pause. The strain on motors, pipes, and electrical systems is enormous. If even a few pumps fail, entire neighborhoods could flood far deeper than they already have. Emergency crews prepare backup generators in case power systems begin to falter, because electricity is now the thin line between Miami Beach and the ocean surrounding it. As the afternoon sun sinks lower, the flooding begins to test other parts of the city's infrastructure. Traffic signals flicker in flooded intersections. Parking garages close their lower levels. Some underground utilities are temporarily shut down to avoid saltwater damage spreading through electrical networks. The pumps continue pushing water outward. Slowly, the streets begin draining, but the victory feels fragile. because everyone watching the situation understands something troubling. This flooding did not come from a hurricane. There was no storm surge, no violent weather system forcing the ocean onto land. This happened during a calm day, driven only by the gravitational pull of the moon and sun. And if king tides alone can push Miami Beach this close to its limits, then the city may be facing a future where the ocean keeps coming back, stronger each year. As evening approaches, the water in Miami Beach finally begins to retreat. The king tide slowly releases its grip on the coastline, and the pumps still roaring beneath the streets start gaining ground. Inch by inch, the flooded roads begin to drain. Shallow canals shrink back into puddles. Cars cautiously return to the streets. Shops reopen their doors. From a distance, the city almost looks normal again. But the calm hides an uncomfortable truth, because nothing that happened today was unusual in the eyes of scientists. In fact, many experts have warned that scenes like this will become more common in the years ahead. King tides happen several times every year, driven by predictable gravitational cycles between the Earth, Moon, and Sun. But in recent decades, something has been changing. The ocean itself is rising. Even small increases in sea level dramatically amplify these high tides. Water that once stayed safely offshore now pushes farther inland, creeping into places it never reached before. For Miami Beach, that creates a dangerous equation. A city built only a few feet above sea level, resting on porous limestone that allows seawater to move underground, and surrounded on all sides by a warming ocean that continues to climb higher. The $500 million pump system was designed as a defense, a way to buy the city time while leaders search for longer-term solutions. But today's flooding has exposed a troubling possibility. Time may be running faster than anyone expected, because pumps can remove water from streets. They cannot stop the ocean from rising beneath the ground. They cannot seal the limestone foundation that connects Miami Beach to the Atlantic itself. And as scientists continue monitoring the tides along Florida's coast, one question now hangs over the future of this famous island city. If the pumps struggled during today's king tide, what happens when the next one arrives higher? Or when a powerful storm pushes the ocean toward shore at the same moment the tide reaches its peak? Tonight, Miami Beach dries out once again. But the ocean that flooded its streets today isn't going anywhere. And the next time it comes back, it may not stop at a few inches of water,